So can the officers please introduce themselves, just so as I remember here?
Hello, I'm Tracy Farthing, Planning Officer.
Catherine Pearson, the Area Team Leader.
Evening members, Patrick Arthur, Strategic Sites Planner, standing in for Beth Harlan-Smith, Head of Planning.
Barry Devlin, Planning Solicitor, Waverley Borough Council.
Kimberly Soane, Democratic Services Officer, Clerk in the meeting.
Okay, thank you. So first item, can the committee give permission to sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of November 2019?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 2, any apologies for absence?
We have apologies from Councillor Cossa.
Okay, thank you. Disclosure of interests. Are there any disclosures of interest?
None received prior to the meeting, Chair.
Thank you. Chair. Other? Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to declare an interest in item A1 regarding Caesar's Place, as I'm the one that called this in and have had several lengthy discussions with residents in regards to a site visit, and just wanted to declare that before we started.
Okay. Are there any questions from members of the public?
None delivered, sir.
Okay.
Chair.
Questions from members?
No questions submitted, Chair.
Item 6. Patrick, are there any items of legislation you want to bring to our attention?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Yes, the housing delivery test results for 2019 were published on the 13th of February 2020. This identified that Waverley Borough Council scored 85% in the published housing delivery test results. The outcome of this is that the buffer has been reduced from 20% to 5% of the 5-year housing land supply. So in effect, the housing 5-year housing land supply figure is 5.92 years going forward. Thank you, Chair.
But that's not relevant to any application?
Sorry. That's not relevant to any application tonight.
Okay, fine. Yeah, thanks for the information. Okay, so item 7.1, then, if there are any site inspections which become necessary after this meeting, then they'll be held on the 31st of March, is that right? Okay. Okay, so we'll move on to item 8, which is item A1, Caesar's Place, Oxford Road, Godalming. So, Tracy, you want to make the presentation, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I have one verbal update before discussing the application. 2 letters of representation have been received by one person requesting answers to 3 questions. Question 1, why has Ladymere Place 20 metres away and the cottages 25 metres away, access via Mint Street, not been mentioned in the report? Question 2, this question was regarding health studies. There was a question also as why there were no letters of support by locals if it is an application for vital infrastructure. In answer to these questions, for number 1, given the nature of the proposal and the parameters of the planning considerations, the aforementioned Ladymere Place and the cottages, which I've measured as over 30 metres away from Oxford Place, they're not considered, well, they're considered to be an adequate distance to ensure that no harm would be caused by the proposal. Question 2, regarding health, there's separate legislation that covers the health and safety. This doesn't form part of the planning balance. In regards to number 3, I don't know why there was not any more letters of support. However, letters of support or objection in and of themselves are not a representation as to whether a scheme is acceptable or not. So the application is for the installation of a 5.5 metre tall telecommunications pole with 4 dishes and 4 equipment cabinets at rooftop level with the associated development. Caesar's Place lies to the northeast of Oxford Road and is situated within the Oxford Road Conservation Area and also close to Godalming Conservation Area. The existing plan shows that there is some rooftop paraphernalia at present. The proposal would increase this by way of the telecommunications pole with dishes and 4 cabinets, of which 3 metres would be the maximum height. The site photographs show the site in context from Oxford Road and within the site at points from the northeast in the car park and also from the rooftop space where the equipment is proposed. The matters for consideration are whether the proposal would impact the conservation area and the impact upon visual amenity. Thank you, Chairman.
Can you hear me? Right. Good evening, everybody. I'm a 93-year-old occupant of Caesar's Place, and I'm here to speak on behalf of those objecting to the proposed installation of telecommunications equipment on its roof. Do any of you know anything about Caesar's Place? Have you been there? Few people do know, and obviously not many people go there. So a few brief facts first. It is a McCarthy and Stone retirement living block containing 31 apartments located on the lower slope of Holloway Hill between the Oxford Road and the River Ock. Entrance is from Oxford Road at ground level of what appears to be a 3-storey building. At the opposite end of the building, due to the slope, it's added a couple of floors and became a 5-storey building. According to the site agent, and this is not verified, the structure up to the ground floor level, incorporating the retaining walls to keep Holloway Hill in place, is reinforced concrete. The stories above ground floor are simple, traditional gravity or load-bearing construction. The roof is called a flat roof, but it is a timber-framed, pitched and flat roof, and probably there's a concrete part in the area of the Sun Lounge terrace. Walton Limited, without any invitation or knowledge, prepared a proposal for the installation of telecommunications, including antenna, dishes, pole and equipment cabinets, all located on the Caesar's Place roof. That proposal is their planning application. As you will know from reading our responses to the planning request for comments, this proposal has raised many serious questions. The fundamental question is whether the existing structure, the Caesars Place, is suitable and adequate to carry the additional dead load, live loads, including wind, and the wind tunnel test results required, and with a generous safety factor added. If it isn't, can it easily be adapted and strengthened? Is the obvious second question. The third question is, what about 5G and larger components? I know these questions are not part of the planning department's remit, but these structural matters must be resolved before an acceptable and workable design can be prepared and submitted for planning approval. I consider Walden's application is premature and that no more than an outline permission should be considered. Other matters that should be resolved before final permission is given include security of Caesars Place, our privacy, access for construction, installation, maintenance, and emergency work on the roof. Hazards, including radiation, lightning protection, and signal interference, and the visual aspect. The homeowners in Caesars Place will never be happy as hosts of a telecommuting installation, but there are ways in which the impact can be reduced. Can we go on, please? I can't do it. Right. May I continue? Right. Relocating the cabinets at ground level would eliminate the additional loading above apartment 31, improve the views from the apartments immediately opposite, and remove the need to camouflage the cabinets. The need to visit the roof should be reduced greatly. An external ladder from ground level to the roof would ensure engineers need not enter the building when they are required to go on the roof. Security for the occupants of the apartments is paramount and should be maintained at all times. The noise of engineers working on the roof and at night with lights will be intolerable for the occupants of the apartments. Can night work be prohibited? In closing, I would just say there is a group of elderly, apprehensive, nervous and very angry people just at the end of the high street. Thank you.
Next speaker is Mr. Chris Andrews from Walden Telecom.
That one. Sorry, wrong one. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. As the application is recommended for approval, I don't intend to take up much of your time. Just a little bit of background. There's an existing site at Eashing Farm, which is on the other side of the railway line, and that currently provides coverage to the area. It's possible that this site may have to be taken down because of disagreement with the site owner. So this current proposal is a potential replacement site if the Eashing Farm site is lost from the network. And the intention is that it would only be built if the Eashing Farm site was removed, although I'm not in a position to say at this stage how likely that is. as a replacement, we do have found a suitable site. It is quite a very difficult area to find somewhere suitable, particularly bearing in mind the conservation area setting. We do appreciate the concerns of local residents, but would agree with the comments made by the planning officer in her report. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so move on to a debate. Okay. Right, Councillor Follows, I think you want to say something?
I think on this, so I called this application in after receiving quite a number of letters and a few emails on the subject. I am interested to hear that is actually a replacement mast, because one of the things I was going to say is I was surprised that there was a need for a second one in that particular location, and that doesn't appear to be one of the areas where phone signal is particularly poor in Godalming. There are areas that are, but it's not really around there. So that kind of does answer at least that question as to why. I have a lot of issues, not just about the fact that it's going to be on the roof, but actually the installation of it itself, the actual building work and the impact that's going to have, particularly on certain residents of Caesar's Place. I think clearly if you're going to be improving these to be 5G towers or making other modifications over time, there will be an ongoing maintenance component to this. I'm relatively aware of the sort of maintenance that these things require from my outside role. And I don't think that these residents will be completely left alone in perpetuity with this going on the roof. But actually, the main thing I just want to say is that I'm actually wanting to motion for a deferral because I'd quite like to see the site properly with officers. There was, I think, a little bit of lost in translation between officers and myself and Councillor Rosman, and not at all officers' fault. I think it was me and myself and Anne-Marie in this case. And we would like to motion to defer it to go and have a look with officers and with residents, and also from the other side of the road at Ladymere Place as well. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess at the moment we're discussing that point primarily about whether a site visit is required by members before perhaps we should try and settle that before we move on to any more detailed debate. Councillor Baker, did you want to speak about that point, about the need for a site visit?
Yes, I was going to support Councillor Follow's request for a site visit. I think it's a very good idea. I would also like to ask the last speaker before Councillor Follows about the fact that this may be a replacement site for the Ishing Farm mast. My understanding is that that these masts work on line of sight, and the further away they are from each other, the more powerful the radio waves have to be. I'm just, as a matter of
I prefer not to get in, as that's not a matter, we aren't here to discuss the health issues. That's covered by different legislation. So I'd rather not get into a discussion about something that in the end is not relevant to our debate here.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, I think what I took away from the point about it being a replacement is that it may or may not happen, but that's true of any application we see. You know, for a house or we don't know whether it's going to happen. We have to regard it as on the night as that it will, and so I don't think the status of it being a replacement is relevant to our discussion tonight. It may happen, it may not. Therefore, but we have to assume that it will in our discussion tonight. I mean, does that clarify the position from what we have to do this evening? I believe that's correct. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I know the site well, and I attended the opening of Caesar's Place. So, but I think it's a reasonable request that we defer and have a site visit. This is in a conservation area. We should look at that, and we should consider the full impact of this proposal. So I'm content that we would defer and go for a site visit.
Yes, I totally agree. I feel very sorry for the residents there, because it seems to me that there might be room for the company concerned to look for another site nearer. I'm interested, purely as a question, what kind of a radius does a site have to be in?
We're not here to design radio systems. I mean, they want to put this mast up, and that's the question on the table.
Hello, I support the idea about us deferring this until we've had another site visit. Thanks.
I think we've had a number of speakers. So can I have a proposal to defer?
Yes, I do propose to defer in order to have a site visit, which I believe would be the 31st of March, if that can be arranged.
Okay, so we've had a motion which has been proposed and seconded, so we'll vote on that motion.
Madam Chairman, could I just on that point, could we both use could we also show a hand? Because I think it's important that members of the public see the way in which we're voting. I made that bet. Yeah.
We discussed this before. If you wish to propose that, I believe you have the right to require that.
It's not so obvious when it's on the screen, especially for members of the public. You know.
Okay. Okay, so you are calling for a
propose that we both do it electronically and indicate by what we're doing. It makes it then quite clear.
Okay, we'll do it by. We won't do it by. Rather get into that confusion, which I think is probably a difficult area. We'll do it by hand vote, as we're not actually passing the motion on the paper in terms of whether this application goes through or not. So all those in favour of deferring it for a site visit? Okay, I'll make it unanimous. Thank you. Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, so this will be deferred for a site visit, notionally on the 31st, depending on whether that can be arranged. But okay, sorry to residents to drag you down here, but there will be a site visit, and it'll be brought back, I presume, to the next meeting of this committee in a month's time, isn't it? In a month's time.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item, item 9, which is item A2, WA 2019-1916, 4 New Road, Milford. So, Catherine, you're doing the honours here for the presentation, I understand.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going to wait for the presentation to...
Do you need to go out and come back in again?
Chairman. Members, the application before you is a site located to the southwest of... Oh, there we go. Right. Start again.
Catherine, is your mic on?
Is that okay? Can you hear me? Yeah. Right. Okay. Is it the connection?
No, it's okay. We'll proceed on the basis that we have papers.
You have the papers. The plans that I was going to show you were plans in the report. The only thing that you will not be able to see are some site photographs. The application site is located to the southwest of New Road, close to the junction with the Portsmouth Road, within the settlement boundary of Milford. The site currently comprises... Oh, there we go. Currently comprises a pair of... one half of a pair of semi-detached dwellings. The site is outlined here in red. There is the dwelling here. There is an access road that leads around the side of the property towards the back where there is a detached garage. So these are the existing elevations with number 4 on the right-hand side here. This is the front elevation and the corresponding rear elevation. So, oh, right, okay. So the right-hand image, the left-hand property is the application property. And here are the existing side elevations with the existing floor plans. So again, the image on the left-hand side of the slide is the ground floor and the first floor detailing the 2 bedrooms there. These are the proposed elevations. So the top left-hand corner being the proposed front elevation. You can see there the attached dwelling to the right-hand side of the pair of semis, and the return side elevation that would front onto that access road that I mentioned. The bottom left-hand slide shows the rear elevation, so effectively the proposal would create a terrace of 3, with number 4, the existing number 4 becoming the mid-terrace, and the proposed dwelling on the end, on the left-hand side of the elevation you can see on screen. The proposed floor plans then. So the proposal is to create 2 two-bedroom properties with accommodation spread over the ground and first floors. There will be extensions and alterations to the existing number 4 to create additional ground floor living space, and the second bedroom would be reconfigured with a first floor extension at the rear. You can see on screen now the existing and proposed street scenes. So this is to provide you with some context for the proposals. The top image is the existing, the bottom being the proposed. You can see that the existing pair of semis sits next to, I think, another pair of semis to the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side is number 2, which the front door of that property faces onto the side of the existing number 4, so it faces onto that access driveway that carries on round the rear of the site. So here we have the proposed block plan. So you have the terrace that would be created fronting onto New Road, and the intervening access road that would go between number 4A and number 2. At the rear of the site, the existing garage would be removed, and there would be 4 parking spaces to serve the 2 dwellings, which would accord with the parking guidelines. I'll just take you through some site plans. I'm sure you're familiar with the site. So this is from New Road. You can see that I've labelled number 4, which is the existing property, the access driveway, and you can just see in the corner of that photograph the porch canopy at number 2. So the dwelling would go between the current access driveway and number 4, where the flat roof structures are. This is the garage at the rear of the site that would be removed to create parking to serve the 2 dwellings. And this is a view from the open space at the rear of the site, looking back towards that street scene fronting onto New Road. So you've got number 2 to the left-hand side of the photograph, you've got the access road in the middle, and then the site of the proposed detached dwelling and number 4. Before I go bring you to the key considerations for this evening, there is a short update which you should have a copy of. There is an amendment to the report just to correct the name of the parish council. Apologies for that. And for clarification, we have there reported the parish council's comments in full rather than the usual synopsis that we provide. In terms of our response to that, we consider that the issues raised by the parish council have been considered fully in the report that's before you, and you can see the reference to where those points are covered in your agenda report. The key considerations this evening are visual amenity and design, residential amenity and parking, and the recommendation is that permission be granted subject to the conditions and informatives as set out in your agenda report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, councillors. This plot of land being considered with this application is adjacent to Mouse Hill Green, which will have a wider impact on the community than that of New Road alone. When residents became aware of this application over the Christmas holiday, there was a unanimous feeling of exasperation. This proposal in its simplest form is for a new home to be built in an existing driveway with the creation of a car park in its rear gardens right next to our village green. There have been no consideration of street scenes across from the green from the perspective of Portsmouth Road and Mouse Hill Lane. The rear of the property at number 4 will be significantly altered and will change the street and green scenes from the perspective of the aforementioned streets. The rear of the site will create a car park, and we can see that the views from the green will be permanently affected with the passing and repassing of significantly increased number of vehicles. The proposed dwelling will be the first of its kind in this area as a tag-on to a semi-detached house, so we assert that this is not in keeping with the local area. There are no other developments like this one. We agree with the officers that the plot sizes are relatively small. The proposed garden space for number 4 and 4A New Road is minute, and we take umbrage that developers are relying on our village green for their amenities. The officers have referenced number 2 New Road, which the same developer owns. In order to facilitate this application, the developer has removed part of the boundary wall on New Road to create a hard standing where the original provision by this council was an approved front garden space. Planning permission was granted to number 2 New Road on the basis that this provision of parking would be accommodated by the shared driveway of number 4 New Road. Planning permission for number 2 New Road, number WA/2006/2024, condition 8 stated that no works, alterations or operations shall be undertaken or carried out on the site without the written permission of the local planning authority. We believe this condition has been breached and therefore has already altered the street scene and caused material harm to our neighbourhood and therefore facilitated this application. There was a similar application to build a house in the driveway by the next door neighbour at number 6 New Road. At the time, this application was rejected with the following highlights. It was infilling of a small gap, it was overly cramped, it would not make a positive contribution to the appearance of the area, and it would appear conspicuous. We all think the very same reason should apply to this application. The concern we residents have is parking provision. Along with Whitley Parish Council, we do not believe that the provision of the 4 vehicle parking spaces at the rear of number 4 New Road is practically workable. I've been to the local planning offices and measured the proposed parking spaces, which are 2.5 metres wide. The recommended width for a disabled parking space should be a minimum of 3.3 metres. That being said, we cannot see how, when fully occupied, they will be able to turn around and leave in forward gear. This is simply wishful thinking for this plan and will be so difficult to park down that narrow space that residents will inevitably park on the road. On that note, on the 28th of December 2019, I sent an email to our local councillor, Christine Baker, and copied in a number of councillors. The email demonstrated with evidence that New Road is now regularly becoming blocked, and this causes great concerns for safety of residents and businesses of New Road, as emergency vehicles are unable to pass. This evidence was presented at a time when there were no residents living at number 2 or number 4 New Road. Gratefully, Councillor Peter Martin has responded to this and requested a review by Surrey Highways at some point this year. However, with this in mind, we simply cannot see that by adding another house in a driveway will not cause material harm to existing residents, businesses and visitors to New Road. Had the developers presented an application to extend number 4 New Road to a sizable family home with a fair provision for a sizable garden space and offering parking for the houses in this plot, then there would be no objection from the local residents. In fact, we would support it, as we all want to see an improvement to the condition of this property. However, councillors, shoehorning another house into a driveway is ridiculous and sets a worrying trend for this wider borough. We urge you please to reject this application in this form.
Dear members, thank you for giving me the opportunity of addressing you this evening and to speak in favour of our proposal. My name is Jane Wunderlich and I am a Chartered Town Planner and the agent for the application. You have before you your officers' report, and I thank the officers for their very clear appraisal of the application and their professional recommendation that permission be approved subject to 12 conditions. As you know, Milford is now no longer washed over by the Greenbelt. New Road is within the settlement boundary, within which there's a presumption in favour of development. Over the last 7 years, the pattern of development in Milford has changed, with a number of infill plots and larger housing developments, which have all been approved by this committee. The new house is surrounded by residential development and forms an acceptable infilling within the village of Milford. The new house before you tonight is designed as a 2-bedroom cottage attached to number 4, as you've heard. It will be the same design, scale and massing. It has a front garden to New Road and a private garden to the rear and follows the existing grain of development in New Road. There are no minimum amenity standards set by Waverley Borough Council, and this is a fact in the policies that your local plan contains. We've already heard that there is an adjacent village green that is open to all members of the public to use, and it is a facility and it is an open space. The design and location of the new house protects the amenities of neighbours. There are no overlooking or overshadowing concerns. Most of the concerns that neighbours have expressed, as we've just heard from the objector before me, revolve around on-street parking. Many of the houses in Milford and New Road, and indeed other roads within Milford wider area, do not enjoy private parking areas and rely upon on-street road parking. That's not the case with number 4 New Road. Number 4 currently has parking to the rear and a double garage. Number 2 has parking to the front. Indeed, number 2 had a drop curb to the front of the property that was in existence from a previous commercial building, which number 2 replaced some years ago. So the drop curb was there when the applicants rearranged the parking for number 2. Number 6 has parking at the other end of the site. This application retains this arrangement, with the rear garage being demolished to provide the 4 spaces needed for the new house in number 2. This arrangement meets all of Surrey County Council highway standards and indeed Waverley Borough Council's own standards. The parking spaces, the layout and the articulation between them in terms of access and egress meet the standards. The application, therefore, does not rely on on-site, on-road parking. It has its own off-site parking. To summarise, there are no objections from Natural England, Thames Water, and we've heard qualified that the Whitley Parish Council, the officers don't agree that those objections or concerns have any foundation in planning. As I've already mentioned, the most importantly, there is no objection from Surrey County Council Highways. This scheme is very different from the scheme that was refused at number 6. I confirm the applicant has no objections to any of the conditions as recommended to you, and thank you again for giving me the opportunity for speaking to you tonight. Thank you.
Okay, so as local member Councillor Gale wishes to make some remarks, so you again have 4 minutes for your comments.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to speak tonight to support the residents of New Road who've lodged 17 objections to the development at number 4. Their reasons are many and various, but from what I see, one of the biggest problems is the road has been developed over and over with new properties during recent years, and very few have adequate parking. The application you're looking at tonight does indeed provide 4 parking spaces for 2 properties off-road. However, this does not allow for visitors who would invariably have to park in an already overcrowded road, where I'm told emergency vehicles have struggled to pass through. The problems in parking in New Road are already set to worsen, as the old music works will shortly be redeveloped into a meeting place. And I doubt that the people meeting there will be walking to a venue which has very little off-street parking. Highways have looked at this application, who in principle have no objection, but they have set down various conditions. Condition 1 on their response I find confusing and have asked for clarification of the terminology but have not received a reply. Maybe the committee would know what the answers to this. Access onto New Road shall be provided with 2.4 by 33 metre visibility splays with no obstruction above 1.05 metres. If, as I'm guessing, this means when exiting the property the driver needs to have clear vision 33 metres along New Road, I doubt this will ever be possible due to parked cars either side of the road and up to the exit. They will be exiting between parked cars. Highways also state that vehicles must enter and exit the drive in a forward motion, turning at the bottom to enable them to do so. I would query what size of vehicle they envisage the occupants driving, as there appears to be little space behind the properties to turn. Also, there is a dogleg in the drive. It's quite possible that cars could meet each other part way, meaning some may reverse back out into New Road. You will note Whitley Parish Council had these objections in principle, but the observations and reservations about the road being overcrowded with vehicles was also in their response. Finally, as an application for number 6 New Road was refused on one point due to substandard visibility when leaving the driveway, I would suggest we have a similar situation at number 4. I would suggest this application is deferred until we can ascertain exactly what condition 1 refers to, or at least find out if Highways made a visit or simply worked off plan. I believe this is a safety issue. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. I have been down there to this site. I'm very familiar with it. I'm also very familiar with the genuine concerns about the car parking in New Road. Just to preface my remarks about that, New Road has houses each side, some with quite small frontages, and the road is so narrow that you cannot safely park on both sides of it, because as you've heard from the New Road residents and from Councillor Gale, the bin lorries and emergency vehicles simply cannot get through when people decide to park each side of the road. That's the first thing. I went down there on Sunday evening and it was completely parked up. There were also 3 cars parked outside the Baptist church, and there was no lights on in the Baptist church. There were 5 cars parked down the access to a site for which we have given consent for development, and there were 3 cars at least on the access road that goes down to the car park behind the hairdressers and the vets. So just taking that as background information, there is indeed a problem with the car parking. And I think Councillor Gale has said some very wise words about the problem of getting in and out of the access for number 4 and number 4A if we give consent. I can't comment on the manoeuvring space. That does require some measuring, and I didn't take my surveyor's tape with me, so I suspect that that would need somebody else to check that out. As regards the development itself, what it looks like to me is that there is a choice here between car parking, albeit 2 spaces per dwelling, off-road, or amenity space. And when I looked at the plan of the proposals, I thought that there was a disproportionate amount of drive and parking space on that site. And I don't even, I mean, if we were to consent this application, there's an awful lot of hard standing there. There is an area behind the garage which is, I think, bare earth, or more or less. And I would say, if by chance, and I hope this doesn't happen, we give consent for this development, we condition that grasscrete goes down over the whole area. That's the first thing. Then I turn my attention to the amenity space. It is minute, and if we were to go and look now, the site is very open. It really has been stripped out. You can look over the wall from the green. The wall is about 2'6" high. Someone else can translate that into out of imperial and into metric, but it's very low. So looking at the site from the green, it now looks very open. But if you work out how small the amenity spaces are for those 2 properties, and you consider what will happen when the residents want to put up fencing for their privacy, it's just going to be ridiculous. Frankly, I'm surprised at the officer's recommendation, but it has come to committee, and it is for us members to decide. I would also like to draw attention to something in the report which talks about, I think it's on page 29, the plot sizes, I quote, are considered to be relatively small. However, there are other reasonably small plots within the surrounding area, notably number 2. Well, actually, I've walked up and down that road, and I've walked down all the accesses to the areas behind where people park or have consent for development, and all those gardens are really quite long. They are extremely long on the opposite side from number 4, and they are, well, I can't give you a figure, but they are really quite decently sized gardens extending from the rear of those houses. Number 2 is an aberration, and I don't think that you can say, well, because number 2 is there, it creates a precedent, because we all know there are no precedents in planning. But if you look at the grain of the development, you will see that amenity space, like that proposed for number 4 and number 4A, is simply not a feature of the area. I
Councillor Baker, I think you've had 4
probably
minutes.
covered all the
Yes.
points. You can tell that I feel quite strongly about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Penny Rivers.
Thank you. I'm not going to talk about parking, but on the other 2 reasons for, for having caution. That is a pair of semi-detached properties, and Milford will have, if we allow this, a terrace. And therefore, I cannot see how that cannot have an effect, an adverse effect on the residential amenity and on the visual amenity and design. So I am minded not to approve.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I'm very familiar with this property and I'm very familiar with the street. I'm the county councillor for parts of Godalming and for Milford, so I know it very well. I have to say, I really don't like this application at all. I feel that I think it's going to be tricky to justify something on the car park, and I'll come to the car parking in a moment, because we haven't got an objection from the county council, and there are all sorts of, but there are 4 parking spaces, no matter that it's difficult to get in and out, and I think that's a kind of a difficult thing to sustain if we lodge that as an objection. Although I do entirely agree with many of the thoughts and the comments that have been made about the paucity of the access and of the car parking. I think my principal objection to this is that it's out of keeping with the street scene. I just think that attacking on an additional house, it destroys the symmetry of the 2 semi-detached buildings there. And instead of having a pair of semi-detached, we have a sort of semi-detached on one side and a sort of a terrace on the other. And that's not the way it was designed. I don't think that looks good as far as the street scene is concerned. So my number 1 objection is the lack of symmetry and the fact that it's out of keeping with the street. I think I think the rest is very difficult. I think it is the additional house is cramped. Again, I think out of keeping with the street scene, and I just think it's just wrong for the road. That would be my principal reason for objecting. I'll listen to what others say and perhaps change my mind, but I'm inclined to vote against. Just on the parking, I have been working with the highways, with the parking team. There is a proposal that they've put to me in the last few days, which would increase the parking restrictions on one side of the road. In fact, they're proposing that a double or single yellow line should extend to in front of number 2 and number 4 New Road. That would have to come to the local committee. That would then have to go out to consultation and come back to the local committee. That would take some time to do. That's the process, but it is underway, and I'll be in touch with Mr. Tompkins on that question. But I regard that as being a little separate. It's, of course, important that emergency vehicles get through. Sometimes the solution to these problems is worse than the problem. If you destroy the parking potential, then all sorts of people are going to be very upset. The emergency vehicles can get through, but people can't park their cars. But that's another issue. So I would not be happy to support this as I see it at the moment for the reasons that I've outlined. Thank you.
Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to Councillors Gale and Baker for giving us some good context on this. I actually do share many of the concerns of Councillor Martin on this. The Highways Authority have put us in a bit of a bind in regards to those particular issues, however much we all know what that is like. And certainly many of us in this room had the debate, a very lengthy debate, about the number of people who'd be coming to and from the music works and the impact that that would have upon this whole area, which I would personally consider material, as the Highways Agency have taken that effectively out of our arsenal for this one. I think we should be looking at the amenity space as the issue. Diminished amenity space here, I think, is the main material issue. The other thing I'd point out as well is I'm fairly sure Whitley's neighbourhood plan is in its Reg 16 consultation, and it required a 10-metre deep depth and width between each house, which I'm fairly sure this wouldn't meet. And as much as it's only in its Reg 16 consultation, it does have some weight. It should have some weight in what we're thinking about, because clearly that's the direction that Whitley Parish Council are thinking their neighbourhood should go. So I'll throw that one into the list as well. But for me, the main objection I think that we can actually pin to something is the lack of amenity space, which I think is self-evident by the design. Thank you.
Councillor Martin, again.
Sorry, can I just come back on that? I do agree in terms of the amenity space, but if we look at the location plan, the amenity space for number 2 is really quite tiny. And, you know, you would say, well, amenity space isn't very good, and I agree. But right next door, there's a house which has very limited amenity space, so I'm not quite sure of how well that would stand up, which is why I come back. I think it's the street scene which is the key thing.
Are there any other speakers? There was a question from Councillor Gale about interpreting the highway advice. Can one of the officers try and throw some light on that?
Chairman, if I may, thank you. There were a couple of questions raised regarding the highways advice. The first one, which was in relation to visibility along the road. This is obviously an existing access that we're talking about being utilised for this additional dwelling. The County Council will advise on matters such as visibility, and in this case they are clearly satisfied that that visibility can be maintained along New Road. They have their technical standards based on the speed of the road, and in this case clearly feel that this is acceptable. That land over which that visibility splay is achieved must be highway land in order for them to be satisfied that it can be controlled and kept free of development in perpetuity by way of a condition. With regards to the question as to whether they've been out and visited, I don't know. I would hope so, but I can't confirm one way or another. Was there another question that I was answering on highway matters?
I think there's a question of access to the car parking spaces and whether you can get in and out other than with very great difficulty.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Yes, so I don't believe we have a swept path analysis, which is the tool used to demonstrate whether access can be achieved and whether you can manoeuvre a vehicle in and out of there. What I would say again is this is an existing arrangement. This access road serves the existing property. So we have to be mindful of that in making our assessment. Obviously, in terms of width, it appears to be satisfactory to accommodate the vehicles, and there is a significant amount of space. As I say, I can't confirm that you'll be able to turn in there, but certainly from looking at the plan which is in front of you now, and the minimum dimensions given for parking spaces and the access driveway, it does appear that there will be sufficient turning space for that to occur. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, I think Councillor Williams.
It's just in regard to the last point. Clearly, if the analysis hasn't been done, certainly inspecting the plan by sight does suggest to me that, and it may just be my driving, but I really cannot see how actually you could, with 4 cars parked in those spaces, if you happen to be in the right-hand space of the block of 3, how you could possibly emerge from that area in forward gear if you drove into that space in forward gear.
Councillor Ells.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I may be the one lone voice in this room, but I'm struggling to see any reason for refusing this application. The fact that you don't like the look of it probably isn't a planning matter. Highways have said that they're quite happy with the access and the parking. I've actually taken the trouble to put a scale rule on the drawings that are available, and there's that the parking area does comply with all standards, the parking spaces apply with standards, and the turning area comply with standards. The amenity areas, okay, they're small, but if you look at the location plan, it looks to me as if 1, 3 opposite are even smaller. I honestly think we're on a hide into nothing if we refuse this and they go to appeal, and we'll end up with egg on our faces as we do so many times. Thank you.
Councillor Follows, do you want to...
Yeah, just to clarify one of my earlier points, it would be policy ND8 of Whitley's emerging neighbourhood plan, currently under Reg 16 consultation, which is safeguarding residential amenity. And I think that would be one that we could pin our mast on, particularly because by the time any appeal for this got to the books, that plan would have passed, I suspect.
Just to clarify that plan is not part of the development plan and shouldn't be afforded any material weight, so we can't append a decision on that policy number, unfortunately, at this time. No, I'm afraid not. It's valid in the context of the local plan policy in terms of design. The local plan policy, as the extant policy, doesn't have a specific reference or requirement in terms of a minimum for amenity space. Therefore, there's no...
Could you just clarify as to the size of the garden then, and I'll be quiet. Yeah.
Try and move to a vote, but Councillor Baker, do you want to very briefly offer any comments?
Sorry, yes. I mean, I think what this site, what this proposal expresses is you either have the amenity space or the parking. So I am going to make a proposal that we refuse this application on the grounds of inadequate amenity space. I defer to the
we'll take
Deputy Chairman as regards the car parking problem.
We'll vote on the motion, which is in terms of, and then we'll see after that. We'll decide what to do depending on the result. Councillor Wilson, do you briefly, please.
I think we really ought to go and look at it. And I would suggest that we defer this until we are convinced that what we are being told is correct.
So I don't understand. What? No, I think we're going to move to a vote. There's a motion on the... Yeah, I think we'll move to vote.
No,
okay.
We've had a motion and a second.
Sorry,
to
which
defer.
is... Right. I heard who was seconding the deferment?
No, I was seconding Councillor Baker's motion to refuse.
Yes. I'm getting confused myself.
The usual
here.
process is that we take the vote on the vote that's before us, which is to say, here is the vote has come and it's recommended for acceptance. We should vote on that first, and then if it's defeated, then we bring in the extra. Would be the correct process of procedure, Chairman.
Okay. I stand corrected, but I'm just a bit eager.
You should ask if George Wilson has a second.
Yes. So, but there was a proposal for deferment from Councillor Wilson. Is there a seconder to Councillor Wilson's motion to defer? No, there's not. Okay, sorry. So we'll move to the vote then. So I'll read out So subject to conditions 1 to 12 and informatives 1 to 8, permission be granted. So we're voting on that motion. So we'll do it electronically? Do you want to do it electronically? Yeah. Yes, please. Okay. Voting to permit here.
Kimberly,
No.
can I ask you to put the thing on the results on the screen?
Well, I'm hoping I can.
Yeah.
The problem we've got is because we've actually got the laptop plugged into the dais, because
Right.
the round table's not working, but I will try and do
Something
it
for us to take
you.
away. Yeah.
Do you want to see that now, do you, Councillor Follows?
The principle of this is that it should be clear to both the people in the room, people on the webcast,
Okay,
and then
well,
on the website who has voted what.
At the risk
Yeah.
of another 10 minutes of fiddling.
Yeah.
But, okay, good. Thank you. Right. Okay. Now, we had. Okay. Now we had at the briefing for JPC this week. The head of planning suggested that when this happens, we have a very short adjournment while the officers confer about what might happen, what they might offer as reasons that will stand up. So I suggest now, I invite those members who feel they have ideas to come forward and speak to the officers, but we'll have 5 minutes, because I think last time we did this on the fly, it didn't work very well. So we've got 5 minutes break. Those who wish to offer suggestions, come forward and offer them to the officers, then we'll reconvene, and there'll be a motion to, as to the grounds for which we're refusing.
With the pattern of development and character of the area, contrary to policy TD1 of Local Plan Part 1 and policies D1, D4 of the saved Local Plan 2002. Thank you, Chairman.
Can I have a member propose that? Councillor Baker.
Can I propose that, please, Chair?
Okay, thank you. So does anyone wish to propose any amendment to that proposal? Okay, in which case that's the, it'll now proceed to a vote on that motion that permission be refused with for the grounds that Catherine just read out. So are we ready to vote on that?
We are ready.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you for residents for attending. So we'll move on to item B1, 131 George Road, Farncombe, and it's Catherine again.
Thank you, Chairman. The next two items are being reported to the committee as the agent for the applications is related to a member of staff, so they do not fall within the scheme of delegation. The first application, 131 George Road, Farncombe. The application site is located to the north of George Road. The application is for a single-storey rear extension, as you can see on the proposed block plan. So an existing floor plan there, you can see the traditional sort of layout of this property, the existing elevations. The proposed floor plans, as you can see, the image on the left-hand side of your screen is the ground floor image. It is a ground floor extension only. The extension would wrap around where the existing footprint of the dwelling is, with a maximum depth along the side of 5.7 metres, a height of 2.2 metres to the eaves and 3.4 metres to the ridge. As you can see, the extension shown in the top left-hand image here, the extension would have a pitched roof with roof lights, so it would hip away from the boundary. The key matters for consideration are visual amenity and design and residential amenity, and the recommendation is that permission is granted. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any comments from members?
I see no objection. I would propose we go straight to a vote.
Yeah. I need to ask whether anyone else wants to speak. No, in that case, we'll move to a vote. Sorry, I need to read that recommendation. Fine. Yeah, so the motion is that subject to conditions 1 to 4, permission be granted.
And that's unanimous.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on then to item B2, 33 Moor Road, Farncombe. Catherine again.
Thank you, Chairman. The application site is located to the north of Moor Road in Farncombe, in the developed area. Again, an application for a single-storey rear extension being reported to you for the same reason. Here we have the proposed block plan, so you can see again semi-detached property extending to the rear. Here we have the existing elevations. As you can see, there's an existing single-storey arrangement on the rear elevation, the bottom left-hand elevation, and the existing floor plans, the corresponding proposed floor plans. The extension would extend to a depth of 4.9 metres at its deepest point and a height of 2.95 metres. This extension would have a flat roof as opposed to a pitched roof. Here we have the proposed elevations. You can see the bottom left-hand drawing is probably the most, the bottom left and top right, which show the side elevation and rear elevation. So that existing single-storey arrangement at the rear would be replaced by an extension across the full rear width. Again, the considerations for members this evening are the visual amenity and design and impact on residential amenity, and the recommendation is that permission is granted. Thank you, Chairman.
I do have a question from Councillor Martin, so if you can... I was surprised that the 45-degree rule was ejected so easily. I mean, it's a very long extension, and the neighbour will be looking at a lot of brick wall, rather than. I mean, it's mentioned there that a fence is currently in place, but it's replaced by a lot of brick. Can you best, just for my comfort, can you explain again why it is that rule is being waived here, or at least not? It's been given less weight.
Thank you, Chairman. As members are aware, those figures quoted in relation to loss of light, etc., are guidelines to help you form a decision. In this case, this application is replacing an existing arrangement along that boundary. It is deep and it does have a height of 2.95 metres. However, we have to be mindful of the existing arrangement on the boundary, the fact that extensions under permitted development can be carried out to a certain depth, 3 metres in this case, they would be permissible. In this case, we have sort of a staggered arrangement at the rear, which is traditional in older properties, which is probably the reason why you've got an application for permission rather than a permitted development scheme before you. Having said that, a height of 2.95 metres on the boundary, whilst that will result in some additional impact, we do have to be mindful of what you can build under permitted development. You can build up to 3 metres in height, and you can also build and erect fencing up to that height. So really, if you look at the existing versus the proposed, so the existing ground floor plan, which you can see before you now, and compare it to the proposed, what we're really talking about is the bit that projects beyond the rear part of the bathroom. That is the additional impact that you are considering. Officers are of the view that whilst this does contravene the 45-degree rule, the height and design of the extension is not so harmful that we feel we could sustain a reason for refusal in this instance. Thank you, Chairman.
Floyd Douglas.
We've had no representation from neighbours. Fine, thank you.
Though we should be mindful that that's not a reason for not considering the fact, but yeah. Councillor Martin.
It is a ground floor extension, and maybe a little on the high side, but it's pretty close to what would be acceptable under permitted development. I can see no reasonable grounds for us objecting. I would propose again that we go to a vote.
Yours. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. It's nowhere near what we would allow under permitted development. It's 4.9 as opposed to 3 metres. That's a heck of a lot more. And if we're going to start using the argument that there's a 1.8 high fence, which is a 6-foot high fence, which most houses have next to their rear wall, as an excuse not to use the 45-degree rule, we might as well throw the 45-degree rule out the window and not bother and just let people build what they want in their back gardens. I'm not at all happy about this. I know normally these type of applications we'd put through on the nod, but I think in this case I am minded to vote against.
Any other speakers? Okay, let's move to the vote. So let's read the motion out. So it's the so the motion is that subject to conditions 1 to 2, permission be granted. So please vote. Thank you, councillors, for your attention.